All right, guys, we are on day 14 notes. The title for today's notes is Solve by Completing the Square, which is a brand new topic. We haven't done completing the square yet. This is part 1, and then tomorrow we will do part 2. Part 2 is obviously going to be a little bit harder, so this is basically that introduction. We're going to start really quickly with some warm-up problems. I'm going to go very quickly through these, so if you need to pause the video and stop and kind of try it on your own, do that, because this front page I'm going to go very quickly. So this first one, simplify the square root of negative 27. So again, if you remember, we took out that negative part of it. So I took out the negative 1, and then two things here. The negative 1 is the same thing as I, which is an imaginary, and then you need to break down that 27. So what multiplies to 27? I think of 9 times 3, and they break down the 9 into 3 times 3. I circle my pairs, underline my leftovers, so when I write my final answer, the pair comes on the outside with the I, the leftover 3 stays underneath, and that's my final answer. The next one, simplify. If you look at this problem, you have a plus sign. That means you're just adding them, which is actually the simplest type. All you have to do when you're adding them is to combine like terms. So 3 plus 5 is 8. And then the i's. Negative I plus 4i is positive 3i. And then that's it. You just combine those like terms. This next one is a little bit different because it has a subtraction. And for subtraction, you need to distribute the negative. Don't do anything with the front, but distribute the negative, so that becomes a negative 5, and that becomes a negative 4i, and then you combine like terms. So 3 minus 5 is negative 2. Negative I minus 4i is negative 5i. So it's very similar, you just have to distribute the negative. And then number 4, there's no symbol in between. So if you look in between the parentheses, there's nothing there, so that means you have to FOIL. And again, we talked about this in the last couple days of notes, but FOIL is first term, so 3 times 5 is 15. O is outside terms, so 3 times 4i is positive 12i. I is inner or inside terms, so negative I times 5 is negative 5i. And then L is the last terms. Negative I times 4i is negative 4i squared. Two things here. You have like terms in the middle. Let's combine those. And you need to remember that I squared is equal to negative 1. So when I rewrite this, I have 15. Combine the middle, that's 7, positive 7i. Then you have negative 4, and then you need to swap out the I squared for the negative 1. Okay, so two things. I'm going to go ahead and do negative 4 times negative 1. That gives me a positive 4. So 15 plus 4 is going to give me a 19, and then plus 7i. Okay. Number 5, simplify. This is a conjugate problem. I showed this to you briefly. You want to get rid of the bottom, so I do 4 minus I. I do that on the top and the bottom. So when I do this on the top, I am distributing. So I distribute that 5 there. And on the bottom, I FOIL. So I'm just going to write this out so you kind of know what I'm doing. So distribute on the top. 5 times 4 is 20. 5 times negative I is negative 5i. On the bottom, 4 times 4 is 16. 4 times negative I is negative 4i. I times 4 is positive 4i. I times negative I is negative I squared. So again, at the bottom, negative 4i and positive 4i should go away. Those always are going to cancel like that. And then I squared is equal to negative 1. So if I rewrite this, I have 20 minus 5i on the top. 16 minus, and then negative 1 on the bottom. So if I rewrite this, 20 minus 5i for the top, and then 16 plus 1 is going to give me 17. And then you can rewrite this in two pieces, like separate the 20 over 17 minus 5i over 17. If you want, you kind of break it into two pieces. They do that a lot on the ACT or SAT. Okay, solve and simplify. Next one, number 6. This is where we had 4 steps. Step 1 is to get x squared by itself. So you need to subtract 12 to the other side. So I have 3x squared is equal to negative 12. It's not alone yet. You need to get that 3 by itself. So divide you need to get x squared by itself, so get rid of the 3, divide by 3, so you have x squared is equal to negative 4. Now you want to square root both sides. That'll get rid of that little 2. And when you square root both sides, you can put in your plus or minus symbol. So when I clean this up, I have x equals plus or minus square root of negative 4. Okay, I'm going to do this quickly. The square root of 4 is a perfect square. The square root of 4, let's fix this here. The square root of 4 is 2. It has a negative in there, so my answer is going to have an I in it. So my answer is plus or minus 2I. Okay, then it says, what are the methods of solving quadratics? We've done actually quite a few methods so far. So way long time ago, kind of back in the day when we were even in class, we did a first method before you even knew it, which was graphing. So I'm going to write on here graphing, which could be in the calculator. We did some of it by hand. I know some of you are using Desmos, anything like that, where you find the x-intercepts, you find the max and the min, the solutions, like all that kind of stuff. That was graphing. Then recently we did factoring. We factored, and we did lots of different types of factoring, difference of squares, factor by grouping, trial and error, all that kind of stuff. And then the other day we just did solving by square roots. Solving by square roots. So those are the 3 that we know so far. There's going to be 4, which I don't know yet. We're going to do that in a second, and there's going to be a 5th one. Okay, so number 4 and number 5, those are coming. We're going to do number 4 right now. The 4th way to solve is this new method by completing the square. So this is where we're going to spend our time. Problem 1, it says solve the quadratic by completing the square. Again, this is our new method to solve a quadratic equation. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take this number here, that number by itself, and I'm going to move it to the other side. So I'm going to go ahead and add 32 to the other side. And this is kind of weird, but when I do this, I'm going to write this as x squared minus 4x, and I'm going to leave a blank space where it used to be, and it equals 32. Remember, equations have to balance each other out. So if I put a blank space on the left, I have to put a blank space on the right. Okay, from here, this is just kind of a pattern. I'm going to take half of this middle term. So half of negative 4 is negative 2, and I square it. Negative 2 squared is a positive 4, and you fill that in to the blank spaces. Now, and I'm going to jump a little bit, when you write this, your final kind of thing that you're going to write here, we're going to have some solving, but how you would write this is this negative 2 that we did here, you're going to fill that in into the set of parentheses that I created. So see how that negative 2 I highlighted yellow? That's going to match this other part that I highlighted yellow. And 32 plus 4 is going to give me 36. So I have x minus 2 squared equals 36. So now I'm going to take this information and I'm going to start writing it over here, and I'm going to solve this. And I'm going to solve by square roots. So if I solve by square roots, I have x minus 2 squared equals 36. You want to get x squared by itself. It is, so then I square root both sides, so that'll get rid of this. So I have x minus 2 equals plus or minus the square root of 36. Hopefully you're like, oh, that looks familiar. The square root of 36 is 6. Then I'm going to go ahead and add the 2 to the other side. So I have x equals 2 plus or minus 6. We've done an example like this before. Well, we can go ahead, it's just numbers. Go ahead and take 2 plus 6, that's 8. And go ahead and take 2 minus 6, that's negative 4. And those would be our 2 solutions to this problem by using the method of completing the square. Okay, 2 more. First thing I'm going to do is this 5 by itself over there, I'm going to subtract it and move it to the other side. Again, when you write this, put the blank spaces. X squared minus 12x with the blank equals negative 5 with the blank. You take half of this middle term. Half of negative 12 is negative 6. You square it. Negative 6 squared is actually positive 36. You fill that into both of the blank spaces. When you write this, you're going to fill in this negative 6 into the parentheses. So you're going to do x minus 6. Negative 5 plus 36 is going to give you 31. Now you're going to do it just like the other one. You're going to solve by completing the square. So I'm going to square root both sides. So I'm going to have x minus 6 is equal to plus or minus 31. Let's see if we can break down 31. What two numbers multiply to 31? I don't think anything. 31 times 1. Well, that doesn't help me at all. So the only thing I can do here is add 6 to the other side. So when I do this, I'm going to have x equals 6 plus or minus the square root of 31. And again, it's not like I didn't try to simplify it. It just couldn't simplify. So I have a positive answer and I have a negative answer. Okay, our last one. Again, take this negative 3 on the end here. Going to go ahead and add it to the other side, and we're going to put our blank spaces in. So x squared plus 10x with a blank is equal to 3 with the blank. You take half of the middle term, so half of 10 is 5, and you square it. 5 squared is 25. Put that in both of the blank spaces. It's kind of a pattern in the beginning. Then I'm going to go ahead and write this for my next step. Remember, I'm highlighting that 5 in the middle. It's going to match that. It's a positive 5, so I put in a positive 5. 3 plus 25 is 28. So that's where I'm at so far. Now I need to keep solving this for x. So I'm going to go ahead and square root both sides. So that will go away. I'm going to be left with x plus 5 is equal to plus or minus the square root of 28. Don't forget your plus or minus. And then I'm going to see if I can break down the 28. So two things are multiplied to 28. For me, the first thing I think about is 14 and 2. And then 14 can break down to 7 and 2. And then I have a match with the 2's and a leftover 7. So I could do that. So I have x plus 5 equals plus or minus 2 comes to the outside, leftovers stay underneath. X is not completely alone. I need to move this 5 to the other side. Make sure you put it in the front. So x equals negative 5 goes first, then plus or minus 2 root 7. And now x is by itself. That is our final answer.